It's been a few months since the US Embassy recommended that all US citizens living in Japan go back to the US because the coronavirus was supposed to be really deadly in Japan. Well, it's been a few months since then, and we've seen how it turned out. It's actually over 100 times more deadly in the US, which is one reason why I never trust the government. Another reason why I never trust the government is because of the whole George Floyd situation, with police officers basically just killing an unarmed black man by kneeling on his neck for over 8 minutes. And I'm so glad not to be in the US right now, being involved in all those riots and protests, but at the same time, I do want to get my opinion out there because I think having a legal background and not being white, but also not being black, I have some perspectives that I want to share. So, here we go. First of all, to sum up my opinion in just a few short words. One, I fully support 100% the non-violent protests. Two, fuck the police. And three, fuck the rioters. So, here we go. Let's start out with the police. I think the police are just fucking corrupt from the ground up, and I felt this way for a long time. I really hope that the one positive that's going to come out of this is that there's going to be a lot of police reform. I have never had a positive interaction with the police in my life until I started working in traffic court, and I was in a position where they knew that I was on their side as a prosecutor. And this brings me to how I personally know how corrupt these police officers are. Now, you'll see that most police officers aren't going around shooting people. You know, you're not going to find people so corrupt so often that they're just going to kill people in broad daylight. That's just a few of them. And you'll get this opinion from a lot of conservatives and people who support the police generally, that they're just a few bad apples and everyone else is just an upstanding citizen. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, because you'll see every single officer, if they get a ticket, they're going to fight that. They're going to feel entitled to just rip that up and try to get it dismissed through pulling whatever strings they have to. If you're the wife of a police officer, son, daughter of a police officer, just even their neighbor or their friend sometimes, they're just going to march in there and say, yeah, just come on, rip this ticket up for us if you know what's good for you. So, yeah, the police are totally corrupt in that angle. I don't know a single police officer who wouldn't try to get out of a ticket. And, you know, of course, there's a huge difference between trying to get out of a ticket and killing someone. But there's a whole scale, a whole spectrum in the middle of gradually more serious and serious offenses that many officers are going to try to get away with. Like, they're not just going to go hunting black people in broad daylight. They're just a very few small subset of officers who would do that. But many officers, perhaps the majority of officers, are going to try to lie or trick people into giving up their constitutional rights. And it's fucking disgusting. You know, if an officer pulls you over and they say, can I search your car? You actually have the right to say no, but they're operating on the assumption that most people are either going to be too scared to say no, or they simply won't know their rights and say, go ahead, officer. And then they'll just try to find any little excuse they can to arrest you or to put any charges on you, plant evidence on you in some cases, just turn off their body cameras sometimes so that none of this gets caught. It's really fucking disgusting. And if you are one of the few people who are just well-read enough to know that you can say no to an officer asking for consent to search your car, then the officer can pull this move. He'll say, what's that smell? Smells like marijuana in there. Sir, please step out of the car. And they will search your car anyway. They will find a way to get in there, whether it's legal or not. And then when you bring this up at trial, they'll say, oh, well, it was just a mistake. But in my training and experience as a police officer of 20 years, I really did think there was marijuana in there. And the officers, the courts, are going to let that slip through time and time again. You can't win. So there are plenty of officers who are going to try to do that. They're going to lie to you during plea bargaining. They're going to say that they have evidence of you that they don't. They're not going to turn over all the evidence that they do have on you. You know, and let's just get the civil forfeiture here. Civil forfeiture is perhaps the most disgusting practice the police have that is overtly legal. This is a practice in which they can arrest you, seize all your shit, keep it for themselves, even if you end up being not guilty. They can take money from you, they can take possessions, they can take guns and weapons, they can take whatever the fuck they want, and this is a huge source of revenue, an unbelievably huge source of revenue for police departments across the country. And this is overtly legal somehow, based on some really shady precedents that the Supreme Court just kind of referred to because they had to find some way to uphold whatever the police wanted, because if you say no to the police, they throw their fucking temper tantrums. The police are gonna go on their little blue flu and let the public just be subject to whatever criminal shit that's going on without being stopped by them, because If the police really want to get what they want, or the police unions don't get what they want, they can just take the day off, let criminals do whatever the fuck they want, and they have that trump card of upsetting public safety if they don't get every single little fucking thing they want. And there's police unions that make it really hard to fire bad police officers. Well, like all unions, they make it really hard to fire people, but the police officers are especially corrupt because this is a public union that's putting public safety at jeopardy by going on what's effectively a strike. So that's all really fucking corrupt. And I have a whole list here. I really don't like reading off lists when I make videos, but man, I could go on rants for days. And I haven't even gotten to racism yet. So let's talk about racism by the police for a moment. I'm not black and I'm not white. I think I have it somewhere in the middle. Like I said, I've never had a pleasant experience with police officers until I was actually working as a prosecutor. If I saw the police in public and I interacted with them, at best they would ignore me. At worst, they just harassed me, but they wouldn't like throw me in cuffs. They wouldn't threaten me or anything like that. I'm sure if I were black, it would be a lot worse, and if I were white, it would be a lot better. You can look at this some other angles too. Sometimes it just depends based on your income or perceived income. Sometimes it depends on whether you're male or female, how much police are going to harass you or protect you. And yeah, there is no doubt in my mind that there are serious problems with at least implicit bias, perhaps not explicit bias so much, but definitely implicit bias. And unfortunately, like, I don't think this is even a zero-sum game. Like, I don't think that black people have it as bad as white people have it good. I think that officers are generally assholes to everyone, and that they're just much, much bigger assholes to you if you're black, or if you're like a young male, or if you're poor or something like that. And they'll still be shitty to you if you're a rich white woman, just, you know, much less shitty, or maybe slightly helpful. But they're certainly not going to be as good to you as they are bad to others. I think they're just generally bad overall. So yeah, the police really need to fucking reform. And this is as good as an opportunity as we're ever going to have to get that done. Let's talk about the George Floyd case specifically. In this case, you have an officer kneeling on an unarmed black man's neck as he's pinned to the ground by other officers, doing that for 8 minutes and effectively killing him. I know the autopsy report is saying that there are maybe other factors involved, but I don't think there's any question that at least one major cause, if not the predominant cause, of the death was kneeling on his neck for an extended amount of time. I fully expect this to be a murder conviction in the third degree, except for the slight possibility that in Minnesota there is some possibility that third degree murder is not applicable to cases where you're specifically directing your actions against a single person. But I still don't think that's going to be much of an issue. As far as I know, third degree murder is very likely. They charged him with second degree murder. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. In this case, it's unintentional second-degree murder, which means basically felony murder. They have to figure out if they can get him for a certain felony and then say that he caused a murder while committing this felony. There is a good case for that. I don't think it's a slam dunk, but at least third degree. And certainly there's going to be some sort of manslaughter charge. Regardless, I think the main officer, the one who kneeled on the neck, is definitely going to jail in this case. He was fired immediately. He was arrested. And yeah, I think he's definitely going to jail here. The other three officers, they're trying to get him on this aiding and abetting sort of theory. It's a little bit flimsy. I think there's a good chance they could go to jail, but I also think there's a reasonable chance they could walk free in this one, because it's really hard to say that they had a duty to actively stop the officer who was kneeling on his neck and make him get off. That's an uphill battle in my view, but at least the main officer, I think he's definitely going to go to jail. And so if justice is being served in that regard, let's get to why I have a problem with the rioters. What's the point of the rioters if you're probably going to get a favorable verdict against the main killer here? Well, the rioters here, they all have their different purposes, but they generally fall into a few different categories. And once again, I want to very clearly distinguish between the peaceful protesters and the violent rioters here. The peaceful protesters here, that's what you should be doing. It's right in the First Amendment, right to peaceful assembly. This is how you should be affecting change in the United States of America. But the rioters, they're not doing this for some sense of justice for George Floyd. Maybe a very small percentage of them are, but you know, actually committing these acts of violence are not going to help George Floyd. They're not going to bring him back. They're not going to affect any change, really. They're doing this because they want to vent. They're doing this because they want to be opportunistic and take advantage and get some Nikes or some some LCD TVs. Some of them are doing this because they have it's just fun for them to get away with committing crimes, and they're getting a high off this. And some of them, they're just doing this as part of a broader political agenda. They're trying to perhaps pin this on Trump, when this is no more Trump's fault than Obama is to blame for Ferguson or Baltimore or any of these other things that happened under Obama. Donald Trump, I'm no fan of Trump, but it's not his fault that this shit happened. Pretty much everyone in a position of power in Minnesota, Minneapolis, was a Democrat. So don't try to blame this on Trump or the conservatives or anything like that here. So yeah, the rioters, they're fucking stupid. And some people are saying, like, you need riots to get things done. This country was founded on riots. Here's the difference. People in 1776, if they were causing riots and they got caught, they would get killed. They would get shot. They would get stabbed. What happens in the year 2020? You cause these riots and you walk right up to police officers, get in their faces, and expect them to do absolutely nothing to you, knowing that they would get in trouble if they show the slightest misdeed. So people are like getting right up in their faces. They're dangling donuts in front of them. They're pushing them. They're beating them. And they know that, like, if they just push back an inch, this all goes on social media. They can cry foul. They can say the police are still being violent. And it's just a fucking pussy move. So I have no respect for the rioters who are doing this shit. So yeah, and I'm a libertarian. I don't want to see force being used on anyone. I don't want to see the police cracking down on riots or the National Guard of all things. But this is the difference between libertarians and anarchists. Anarchists would say, yeah, it's a free-for-all. Libertarians say that you have to use some force to protect people and property. The minimum force necessary, but there is a role for the police, or even perhaps the National Guard, God forbid, to actually do these things. So I don't like what's going on, but at the same time, some minimum force is necessary, and to some extent, I do have to be on the side of the police and the National Guard and some of these government figures, even though that really disgusts me to my core. So here we go. The ultimate conclusion of all this, and what I really hate to admit, but what seems to be true here, is that perhaps you need riots on this scale to actually get shit done. And I don't know that they're going about this in the right way, but at least something's going to happen. Last time there were riots in Baltimore, what ended up happening? Really nothing. What happened when Colin Kaepernick took his knee? Really nothing. What happened with all these peaceful protests in the past? Really nothing. And it's because too many people, good people, stay silent. It's because too many people just forget about it the next week once it's out of the news cycle. We have to remember that the police are not necessarily our friends, that racism is still a real thing for sure, and that we need to take an active role in policing our government to make sure that they are protecting us and not, overstepping their boundaries and being fascist, effectively. And I hate these fucking these fools, but this is where we are, unfortunately. Sometimes it perhaps takes a riot to get things done. So I really fucking hate the rioters, and at the same time, I will admit perhaps it is necessary. And hopefully at the end, when all is said and done, the police will keep us safe, and they will protect our rights, and we are a freer and safer society because of it.